The panel is chaired by Shafina. Shafina Segon is the Head of Marketing South Asia for the Taylor & Francis Group. She has over 16 years of experience with some of the world's largest information services, education, technology, and publishing companies, such as Encyclopedia Britannica, Oxford University Press, Pearson Education, and Taylor & Francis Group. I welcome Shafina and all the other panelists. Shafina, please introduce the others. Thank you.
So I'm going to start and end this panel discussion with a couple of things that are carved in stone. One is what's on the door of the Boston Public Library. Carved above their door is an inscription that says "Free to All." It's kind of an inspiring statement and correlates to the National Mission for Libraries statement, Universal Access to Knowledge. So universal access to all knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, I think can be one of the greatest achievements of humankind, like the man on the moon, the Gutenberg Bible, or probably the Library of Alexandria, who during those days and times and eras postulated the idea of a copy of every book for all the people of the world. It could be something that we are remembered for millennia for having achieved. And to achieve that, the whole concept of a library is extremely important, of course. So the second thing we propose as a panel is that libraries deserve to be eternal. And that is something that could be carved in stone, if possible. For every possible academic and intellectual reasons, libraries are here to stay. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the honor of moderating a very interesting panel discussion today on the changing libraries, the state of library infrastructure in India. And I'm doubly pleased to be introducing our resources at the panel because I've had a chance to interact closely with them in personal as well as professional capacities, having learned so much. And I'm sure that their wealth of experience will today serve as a landmark in bringing out some highly conclusive interventions to take back for all of us. So I have with me today Geeta Malhotra, Country Director, Read India, Dr. Anil Kumar, Librarian, IIM Ahmedabad, Carlos Fernandez, who finally agreed to join the panel after a year of very, very close requests, Curator of State Central Library, Goa, and Ruben Cruz, of course, Editor and Book Promotion Officer, NBT, one of the many hats that he adorns. Dr. P.Y. Rajendra Kumar, who was also supposed to join us due to a personal engagement, will not be able to he was not able to come. So let's face it, the world has changed, and so have the audience to the library. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this guy called Brewster Kahle. He's an American inventor and digital librarian. What he's doing right now is building a huge digital library. Every book ever published, every movie ever released, all the stratas of web history, it's all going to be free to public. And his goal is universal access to all knowledge. There is a bookless library last week opened by Florida Polytechnic University, which is spread over 11,000 square feet, housing not even a single physical book and about 150,000 ebooks. Today, we are experimenting with Google Labs Ngram Viewer, an addicting tool that lets you search for words and ideas in a database of 5 million books from across centuries. Frederick Kaplan in Venice has created a Venice Time Machine, a project to digitalize 80 kilometers of books to create historical and geographical simulation of Venice across 1,000 years. With that kind of advancement, where do we stand today? We are going to today talk about the state of Indian libraries and how there is a need for all library and allied sectors, publishers, NGOs, government agencies, etc., to come together. The public library and the university library systems have had a huge role in developing years of independent India. Most of their funding comes from government-given grants. With the setting up of National Mission on Libraries to revitalize the library system in India, library infrastructure is undergoing several changes in the country. And publishers definitely play an important role in growth of libraries too. This panel, therefore, will highlight the changes taking place in the library system in India and discuss the librarian-publisher relationship. But the most important question that we want to address is, are libraries relevant in today's digital age and times? I'm going to invite each of the panelists for 10 minutes to give us an overview of what their thoughts are on the changing library in India. Are the libraries really changing with the times? Are we ready for the 21st century user? All this and more, inclusive of the state of library infrastructure, the reading trends that users have today, and the impact of technology and how far has it permeated into the library systems. After 10 minutes of introduction each, we'll have a moderated discussion followed by question answers by the audience. So I'd like to start by inviting Dr. Anil Kumar, University Librarian, IIM Ahmedabad, to please talk to us about the discovered topics.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thanks to Publishing Next for having invited me to this wonderful conference. This is my first visit to Goa and I'm thoroughly enjoying this. When we talk of libraries, and my domain is academic libraries, you can never discuss the concept of libraries in isolation. It has to be embedded in the ecosystem of education, where there are many other players like publishers also in that ecosystem. The larger question of whether they are relevant or not may be addressed a little later. If we really look at the first pertinent question is, as a theme, the convener of this panel discussion asked me to talk about the state of library infrastructure today, the academic libraries in India. If anybody in this room is asked which is a good academic library that you know or aware of in this country, I can bet you none of you can name any one or two or maybe 5 good libraries that have come up in the last 10 to 15 years. Most of the names that occur to your mind when I say which is the best academic library you have seen would have been set up some 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years back. So there is something very relevant and striking in this statement. Why is it that we have not been able? We have had a lot of universities. It is multiplied a factor of 10. I think there are 700 odd universities today. We had 4 or 5 pre-independence. So we are having a lot of new institutions coming up. There are a lot of things happening in the education sector, a lot of things happening in the economy, but we don't have good libraries. So one question somebody can ask back is probably they are not relevant, so we don't have libraries. But is that the case? Even national institutions like Indian Institutes of Management or Indian Institute of Technology or central universities that are being set up with huge funds and lavish spreads of land given 400, 500 acres for each institution, you don't find good libraries. There is something very grossly wrong happening, or something that is not desirable that is happening in this country, is the loss of the library culture which we used to see a few decades back. And one of the illustrating examples of this is there are hardly very few universities who have librarians today. One of the key factors in probably the decline of library infrastructure is the negligence of human resource aspect of libraries by the government or the decision making or the management. The other aspect or the other facet of this discussion is the usage of libraries. There are good libraries, but the usage is poor. Whenever we talk to colleagues, and by the way, I'm not making a sweeping generalization. There are few institutions and few libraries who are still doing well, and probably this is one of the good public libraries where we still see people coming, using. There are many libraries like that, but I'm talking majorly in academic sector. You find this problem when you discuss to anybody, either the chair of the library committee or the vice chancellor or the director of the institute or even the librarians who are still few in number, that the usage of the libraries is going down. Why is it that people are not coming? Now, if you actually look at this issue a little deeply, probably it has something to do with the need. That means in education, when you are educating yourself, probably you don't need to come to the library. Is it because of digital movement, or is it because of the e-library? Is it because of the Google? One has to sit back and ask. In this context, I can quote you a paper which was published in American Scientist. It's called as a 95% solution, which basically talks about science learning in the classroom is actually 5%, and 95% of the science learning is happening outside the classroom. It was published in, I think, 2000. 2010, American scientist. And this was a cross-country study. It had America, France, Germany, Brazil, and all. And predominantly the findings reported that the science learning is happening outside, and that 95%, the major chunk of learning was happening in the public libraries, in the museums, in the zoos and aquariums, right? And there is a second relevant quote which I was looking at research which was published, which says that, which was named as why the brain prefers, why the human brain prefers the paper. Now there is a lesson in this for the publishers, because we are talking of e-books and digitization and all sorts of things. Now this is purely to do with brain research, which says that human brain is not designed for e or digital reading. I may be creating a flutter in the room by saying that probably print is going to come back, but I strongly feel it is coming back, because I then furthered my research and looked at some other papers which actually talk about psychological studies and educational studies, which say that if a group of students are given print materials and another group of students are given digital materials, n number of experiments have proved beyond doubt that the people who read print have the retention power and comprehension power much better than the ones who went on the digital domain. So is there a lesson for the librarians? Is it for the educators? Is it for the publishers? The question is at large for all of us to answer. In fact, there is a book called as Academically Adrift, which talks about students selecting courses based on the number of pages they have to read. So the larger the number of pages or the readings, the lesser the students enroll for the courses. And this is a global study. So does it really mean that, see, for publishers and for anybody with the content part, producing and marketing is one part of the game, but the sustainable game is your material being used? I can give you a number of examples in national institutes or huge institutions who are reputed beyond doubt, where I know of students who have not entered the library for the entire duration of their course, and they get probably a gold medal or they get the highest package placement. This is happening. That means what you are doing as publishers is irrelevant, what librarians are doing is irrelevant, and what education is doing, because even without, I know of students who are almost on the borderline of passing, but the industry has accepted them in huge, and they're doing quite well now. So probably what we are giving as a sector, in the ecosystem of education, is probably not required, or maybe the industry doesn't understand what is the true value of education. In fact, going beyond libraries, there is an article which is called as Education and Economic Growth, which says that if you invest in education, the returns to the GDP actually over a 10 or 20 year period returns entire expense on your education over a period of time. It's a wonderful study. I suggest all of you to read, which actually gives metrics of today you invest, and after 10 or 20 years, whatever invest you made at a national level, you get back returns much more after a few years, right? So it is not just the years of schooling, but it is what you learn. That article goes on to say that actually if learning is happening only, then the GDP. Now just juxtapose this with another survey which is called as the Global Talent Survey, which happens every year. It's a free report you can download by the Manpower group, which says globally there is a shortage of talent. On one side we have unemployment, on the other side, and India is one of the 4 or 5 countries where there is a huge talent supply which is not there. There is a shortage of talent. Our gross enrollment ratio in this country is 20% roughly, higher education. That means out of 100, 80 students or eligible people cannot access higher education. Out of this 20% who are accessing, our unemployability is 60 to 70%. It's a very sad state of education in this country, and probably one of the reasons is the lack of learning beyond the classroom that we are focusing on. All our policies are focused to what happens in the classroom, whereas if you look at a student, the educational experience that is happening is outside the classroom, and in that outside experience, libraries play a very predominant role. Now, is it relevant or not? At Indian Institute of Management, from my personal experience, we are 24/7, 365 days. I close the library only when we have to fumigate the library. Otherwise, the library is open throughout the day and night, all over the year. We have around 1,000 students doing their MBA program. I have a daily peak of 980. Average is 450 walk-ins, I'm saying. every day there is around 600 papers downloaded on my campus. I have 400 seating capacity in my library. It's a 4-storied building. I run short of chairs. There's something in the library that if you make it inviting, if you make the ambience right, so the physical space of a library, coming to the trends in the library, is one of the key things that is happening globally. Today, if you walk into an academic library in a good institution, you can see things like maker spaces. Libraries are becoming incubators, right? You're having people coming there and actually doing things rather than just reading. The second important thing that is happening is the discussion space for the students and the self-study space in the libraries is actually expanding. And unfortunately, even in the US, when I visit, the libraries have done away with their print collection, most of the libraries, and now they're regretting it. They don't say it publicly, but there is still a regret that all the print has been kept somewhere where you can't. I have a few more minutes, Shafina. The other trend that is happening is in the libraries is you are moving away from ownership of content to access of content. So if you look at libraries, we are more worried of owning the content physically rather than access. And today we are more worried about access rather than owning the content, especially because of the digital era. Second is we are moving from a support role in the good libraries to becoming partners in education. There's a huge potential for publishers and librarians to come together to support researchers especially and students in doing and enhancing their educational experience. Probably that is where we lack, and probably that is where the potential for publishers is. It is not, that's what I always say, that selling, producing and selling the content is a different ballgame. Getting that content used properly, because there is quality content there. It is not being used. So somehow we'll have to work together something where that content gets used by the students and the faculty. And research is becoming a big thing in academic institutions today, especially publications. And as people are saying about referencing, plagiarism and all, copyright, there is a huge learning curve yet to be met in Indian market for young researchers. If probably we can work together, that is another big segment that can be looked at. For instance, in my library, I have dedicated library professionals who support researchers in only mining the data, searching the data, helping them probably citing the data, right? So there is a big role which is available there. On the technology aspect, libraries used to be places where you can come and search for information. Today, they are spaces for discovering information. So adoption of discovery technologies is becoming key, especially because of e-books and e-journals. They have become so much varied and scattered. For the user, it is confusing. For example, if I have 3 leading publishers here and I subscribe to 3 publishers, a user has to come and search on all the 3 platforms unless I have a discovery service, and there is a cost to adopting a discovery service. And the future is for a user just comes and like a Google. Google is mostly used because it is convenient, but it really gives you more trash than what is required, right? And there is a book which is called as Digital Dieting by Tara Brabazon, who was a teacher, who says Google is actually de-skilling information literacy skills in the students. And she goes on to say that there is no difference between a first-year student and a fourth-year student if you read their reports, because everybody is going to the Google and cutting and pasting and giving the same report, right? So we have to be very careful on this E and digital movement, because the most worrying thing, I'll just end with this, is I was reading a research which said that a human part of the brain has a portion which actually helps you deep read. That means you actually seriously read. And this online digital browsing and surfing has actually made your attention small. So your attention is growing smaller. You no longer can sit and read for a long duration of time, and this is happening for the new generation. You talk to the students, you talk to the new generation faculty, most of them share this concern that they are not able to sit and complete 20, 30 pages at a time, which they used to do a few years back. And one of the things research is showing is it is because of the E and the mobile and the iPads and whatever, that, and the worrying, that is also okay, I mean, probably we need to change. But the worrying thing that finding that I was reading was that that part of the brain which actually helps you deep read is actually disappearing because of underutilization or not using that part of the brain. So we have to be very careful whether you are staying on print or shifting online. I'll end here, and probably when questions come, we can take this up. Thank you.
Geeta ji, can I request you to take on next, please?
Good afternoon. I'm not a publisher. I'm not a librarian by a profession. But yes, I have been working in the non-for-profit sector from the last more than 3 decades. And from almost 1 decade, I dedicated my services to set up community library and resource centers in the rural India. It's a marathon task because the partnership starts from the day one. We go to the community in rural areas, ask people what you need. They say, we need books for our children. We need libraries for our children, so that they have a safe space to go and read because they don't have access to books. I'm not talking about technology right now. The mission started in 1981 when the founder of Read Global went to Nepal with the trekking group, and he asked one of the person who helped him in trekking that what she can do for them. He said, please bring the books for children in our Nepal. So the mission started from there. Now Nepal has 56 libraries. In 2007, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation awarded Read Global to replicate the model in India and Bhutan. So I started working in India, and today I have 18 libraries. The number is so small in 8 years, but the task is very marathon. Because convincing people to have libraries in the rural areas, beginning from the partnership, which they don't know what is the meaning of partnership, it brings them at a higher level. So we get the land from the community, we construct the buildings, having minimum 4 to 5 rooms, and dedicated a library to the community. The library has minimum 5 rooms. One is so-called library, having 3,000 to 4,000 books, all selected by the community. There is an education committee who sends us the list of the books their children need or the youth need, and we also add from our side. A computer room having 5 to 7, somewhere 10 computers, free access to internet, multimedia room for the children to learn, women room to come and see the importance of library. They also learn a skill when their children are studying in the library. That is the whole model we have been replicating, and the model has been evolved. We started from a single library, now it's a community library and resource center. We realized the problems that there is no power, there is no electricity in the rural areas. So we then came forward to provide solar panels on each library. So now we can say that it's a holistic model where the library has power, library has books, there is an access to books by the children, by youth, by elderly women. And there are very touching stories when we go to the rural villages and see the model, how it is working. The 50-year-old woman says that she wants to study Quran on her own because that's what she is fascinated by the library. The Quran is available in the library. So we conduct digital literacy classes or otherwise the adult literacy classes to teach women how to read and study. I'm just talking very basic. There are many good case studies where the youth have really helped themselves by coming to the library on a regular, on their examinations and on day to day, then they get good scoring while they are having higher education. When we saw that there is a dropout rate, the girls are not having higher education, we partnered with universities to introduce distance